It's probably the most mature Frozen Soul record that we've written. It's the most in our element. And this record is like a sledgehammer to your head. In general, Frozen Soul has themes of stuff like video games and movies, horror, action, sci-fi, all that kind of stuff.
Tony Gonzalez, and today we are talking to Chad Green, the singer in Frozen Soul, who released a new recording called No Place of Warm. Hello, Chad, how are you?
I'm good, man. How are you doing?
Perfect. How would you define No Place of Warm compared to Crypt of Ice and Glacial Domination?
It's probably the most mature Frozen Soul record that we've written. It's the most in our element. Crypt, we were kind of figuring things out for ourselves. We were trying more to be like an old school band, production and everything. Glacial, we tried to clean it up a little bit, but we sacrificed some of the heaviness. And this record is like a sledgehammer to your head. Like it's just nonstop. It's a nonstop ass whooping. So it's really like the ultimate Frozen Soul record in our eyes. Like we're the most proud of it because we had the time that we needed. So we think like this is the best evolutionary step so far for the band as a record, I think.
And when did this more empowering, almost therapeutic approach emerge within Frozen Soul's core aesthetic?
I mean, it's always been there. I just didn't talk about it as much. But the thing is like when you start a band and you get out there, things like you got to keep things fresh. And like, I tried to do the whole spooky death metal thing, and it wasn't really me. It's not really us. We're like fun people. We are people that like games and movies and, science fiction, fantasy, horror, all that stuff. And, we love those kind of things, and those kind of things take like a lot of imagination and fun. There's a big fun aspect to those things. And so it basically got to the point as we're like writing records and songs where it's like you can only do like the same thing so many times. So we basically started trying to be as like fun as possible. And and we want to inspire other people to have fun, and to take care of themselves and their friends. And we basically just kind of like instead of like hiding it under Frozen themes and death metal terminology, we decided to just bring it to the forefront of the music and say like, if this is like what we're talking about, then why don't we just talk about it? You know what I mean? Instead of just trying to be a spooky death metal band, let's just do what we do. And so, it's really always been there. The songs have always been about, motivating yourself to get through, your day and the things that you have to get through. And, it's always kind of been background music for you to be able to handle shit, and now it's just more so in the light instead of like, supposed to be something that you think about hard, now it's like just us as a band. And so it goes back to kind of, I think this is like our most mature self as a band, because we're 100% authentically just being ourselves, and with this album.
Who is or who are responsible for the writing process in the band?
Well, we all are, really. I mean, we kind of we all think of things, and then we get together and then we put those things together, and we very much write music like an old school band. We write it together. Lyrically, I typically write a lot of lyrical stuff by myself just because I'm super ADHD. So I need to like focus. If I have too many things going on, I get distracted and frustrated. So I like to come up with that stuff by myself. Sometimes Michael and Chris will write riffs, and Matt will write some drum parts. But really we all get together. Sam will come up with ideas, and we just kind of get together and flesh them all out together. And then before you know it, we've got 20 versions of one song.
Hi, I'm Tony Gonzalez, and this is Made in Metal. If you are passionate about rock and metal, this channel is your home. Here we celebrate the musicians, songwriters, and producers who have made history. We have already interviewed some incredible artists, and with your subscription, we can go even farther. Your support gives us visibility, open doors, and allow us to keep creating powerful, authentic content. Subscribe, share, and be part of this metal-loving community. Thanks for being here, and let the good rock keep rolling. Did you arrive at the studio with a blank canvas influence, or you arrive with some demos or something related to this?
Well, we did have some demos for some things we liked, but I mean, in all honesty, it was pretty much a blank slate. Like, we hardly had anything. I mean, because we've been touring for like 3 years. Some of the stuff we had was stuff we wrote during the Crypt days. Some of the stuff we had is stuff we wrote during the Glacial days. And so we kind of had little bits and pieces, like I'd say 6 to 8 things that we thought were really cool. And I don't know, I guess majority of the songs were straight up put together in the studio. So especially the song No Place of Warmth, we wrote that whole song in the studio.
Yes. So maybe does it mean that the first idea that comes into the studio usually change because the other members have something to say or play? How is this process?
Yeah, I mean, things change constantly. Like, when we're writing, it's like, it's a lot different to like play the instruments in person, and hear how they sound. And then you put a nice mic up to them, you put like a really nice mic up to some drums, you've got a completely different feel, for how heavy it is. So, I mean, I think that's probably why this record turned out like so much more powerful in our eyes than the previous stuff, is because like we were able to lay stuff down and be like, holy shit, that's heavy. And then we were, instead of writing the entire song and then just going to record it and being like, I kind of wish we would have done this part heavier. Well, we took it song by song, and in putting them together, we were able to craft them based on how we felt about the parts because of, the studio quality sound and stuff. So, yeah, much different process, but I think it was really awesome.
Taking into account your answer, so the recording session, how long does it take?
Well, it's different. I mean, if you have a bunch of songs and you know what you want to record, it could take like, a few days or a week. For us, it took like 6 or 7 weeks because we just didn't have much and we had to do everything from scratch. So, yeah, it was a lot. Like you do, you have to do like drums, and then you may find out, oh crap, the song's not finished, so we gotta scratch those drums and refinish writing this and then redo the drums again. And so we had a lot of experimentation on this recording session. So because it was never just like recording, it was recording and then writing, because we'd be in the studio for like around 8 hours. And then we would go back to our Airbnb where we were staying, and there was a basement. So we set up an electronic drum set and some amps and stuff, and a little vocal PA and stuff. And we would go literally write and practice the songs. So it was like double duty every day. So quite a big process.
Yes. What did Josh Schroeder specifically bring to your vocal and lyrics?
Say that one more time. Broke up just a little bit.
What did Josh Schroeder specifically brings to your vocal and lyrics?
He actually added a ton. I mean, I wrote most of the lyrics like on my own while once we got most of the songs ironed out structure wise, they went to go record their parts and I was working on lyrics. But after that, me and Josh had to sit down and like really iron out placement, because that was going to determine like, you know, the arrangement of the song in its final form was based on lyrics. So once I had the patterns and everything kind of ironed out, that's when like me and Josh sat down and worked on that stuff and changed some lyrics here and there, and you know, really thought about how catchy the song was, you know. Um, and yeah, I mean, he ended up actually doing a lot. Like, me and him sat there and ran over every little piece of lyric and why that lyric was said, and you know, like what was the point of that, and you know, he would question me and I'd question him, and yeah, he basically had a lot to do with it. It was awesome.
In this process of experimentation in the studio that you mentioned previously, did you learn something or do you experiment with your voice during this intense process?
Yeah, a lot of experimentation actually. I did some things I haven't really done before. Like, I started doing this thing where like, let me find a decent way to explain it. It's kind of hard to explain, but like when the riff, when the chords change, there's a tone that you hear, and I tried to sort of like do a John Tardy kind of obituary esque kind of like, you know, vocal. But what I would do is the way, what I appreciate about his vocals so much is that, you know, he adjusts, you know, his range within his how he enunciates things, and so I kind of did a little bit of that, but based on the chord of the song of the guitar. So like if there would be a natural chord progression, I would progress my scream in that way. But I've never really done anything like that. It was almost like singing with a death metal voice without actually clean singing. So I did that on No Place of Warmth and Invoke War, a few songs.
You tell me that you write part of the lyric or the most part of the lyrics.
Hmm.
And were there, what are the main subject of the lyrics in general terms?
In general, Frozen Soul has themes of stuff like video games and movies, horror, action, sci-fi, all that kind of stuff. And the themes are very revengey, killing, you know, bunch of battle stuff, battle music, you know. But deeper than that, it's all about like self-empowerment, trying to just get through life's like bullshit, you know. Life is very like, it's very up and down, and I mean, I think you know, when I was a kid, I I didn't have a lot. I grew up uh, without a lot of financial freedom. We were pretty poor, and so like I got picked on a lot and stuff, and like listening to heavy music was kind of like my theme song to my hero's story, you know. So I could be the hero in my story and kind of think about those moments that I wish I could have done this or had that, and you know, I could feel like I was king of my world, you know, for once, and I had the ability to be. And so when I write like lyrics for Frozen Soul, I write them in a general way because, you know, when I was poor and couldn't afford lyric books and stuff like that, you know, and CDs, I would just hear a lyric and I would just kind of like come up with my own meaning to it. And then that meaning sometimes meant more than it did when I actually found out what the song was really about that I was listening to. So when I write Frozen Soul lyrics, I try to keep it general so that like when people are listening, if they've never listened to us before, they can hear that powerful word or phrase and be like, hell yeah. Like I can get it done. I can do what I got to do, whether it's working out or, you know, fixing your car, cleaning the house, going to school or whatever, you know. You can battle depression or anything that kind of gets in your way. So it's really like that for all the songs, but I think, you know, there's also for me personally, my personal meanings behind everything is it's really has a lot to do with my experiences with loss. Grief and loss has really affected me mentally, and sometimes it's hard not to feel like when you lose a lot of your family that there's almost no point in continuing, because it's like, where are they at? I kind of want to go join them and see them again, but life keeps going and you have to keep moving, and you can't lay down. And so these songs are kind of like a reminder to myself, like, shut the fuck up and keep moving. You'll see them one day, but now's not the time. Keep going. So that's kind of my personal meaning in everything. And there's obviously different songs have different, like, points in that. But I think overall it's from a personal standpoint, it's about motivating myself. From a general standpoint, it's about motivating whoever's listening. And then from just like an external, like, it's an escape, like a movie or a video game,
Perfectly. So, now that you mentioned this, were there any lyric that felt too personal to include, or there were any lyrics whose message you hide into another concept?
No, I think I kind of put them all out there in this. One of my favorite songs is Ethereal Dreams. It's one of my favorite on the record, and it's another song that's kind of like Arsenal of War from Glacial. So it has to do with the game EverQuest. And I was telling like a story about something that happened in that game a long time ago. A story me and my brothers always used to hear. And at the end, I kind of break character, and you won't really know when you listen to it, but I remember when I wrote it because I was like feeling the groove of the riff, and I just kind of was walking outside. It was hot as fuck. I was walking, thinking of things, just listening to the song over and over again, and I started thinking about my brother Corey, who passed away, and I was just like thinking about the song and thinking about the dragon that the song has to do with from the game, and I was comparing him and treating him like he was kind of like my brother, and I just kind of like broke out of the story and was like, it never really was ever the end, was it? And then I was like, I swear, one day we'll meet again. And that was just like, it was outside of the way I normally talk in Frozen Soul songs. I normally keep things like a little bit more like, I don't know if the word's stoic, but it feels like it is. A little bit more general and hardened. I try to use words that make it feel more like you're reading like sort of like an ancient scroll or something, of like a warrior's past or something like that is how I like to write lyrics. But with that, I was just talking like me, like a normal person. And I don't really do that because you see that more in hardcore and punk. You don't really see that as much in metal. And if it is, it's really fast and it doesn't have any rhythm to it. But I kind of made it fit with the beat. So those lyrics were like very on my nose, I guess, or on my sleeve. Like and then it just felt so good. I went and recorded them to try it out, and it sounded, me and Josh were like, fuck yeah. And so we kept them. But yeah.
Related to the sound and evolution of the band, what elements of your classic influences did you preserve, and what did you evolve in this recording?
I think like we like kept probably like, as far as preserving sound, like we kept like the heaviness, the influence from like Mortician and like Bolt Thrower and stuff like that. We kept that stuff in there, but like one thing that we evolved was like how we write a song. It's like we used to do this thing where we kind of build up the song to drop into this like epic moment, whether it's like a breakdown or whatever, and then we kind of fake it out and go back into those same parts again as like sort of like a verse chorus sort of thing. But on this record we like chopped everything in half basically, and we decided not to go as long with the songs and focus more on like those moments and try to get them to flow together in a reasonable amount of time. Because instead of writing a record that's like 50 minutes, we were like, how could we cut that down and make it to where like you can listen to the whole record when you're driving downtown or something. You got like a 30-minute drive, and you could pretty much listen to the whole record. And we did. I think the record's like 35 minutes long. So that's like one thing we evolved. But yeah, I mean, I think we took all of the elements of the heaviness that we wanted and the fun element to Frozen Soul, and we preserved that, but not overdoing the other stuff. We tried to keep the record as simple, as simple as possible and as fun as possible without like, over diluting parts and stuff like that.
And is this the album where your hardcore and death metal sides fully align?
Honestly, I think so. I really do. I mean, I think like, it's like, for me, when I listen to it, I see it from both perspectives, like from like a hardcore kid in my past and, a death metal singer. And it feels like it feels more like an in the middle. Like it's both, it's meant to be like, you could circle pit if you want, or you could two-step or whatever mosh move you want to do, it can appeal to like both types, because I kind of feel like nowadays a lot of bands are kind of taking that direction. A lot of these different genres are kind of blending together now, and whereas like, some odd years ago you could see, this is the metalcore scene, this is the hardcore scene, this is the metal scene, this is the punk scene over here. Now it's just like you've got a metal band that's got punks in it like us, or hardcore kids like us. I mean, our guitar player Chris, he's toured all over the world in punk bands for 20 so years, so it's like now you've got so much and the kids are just loving it all. The hardcore kids are listening to Obituary, and the Obituary is playing all the hardcore fests, and so is Dying Fetus, and it's just heavy music, and I think like this record kind of shows that the most from us, because we were not afraid to just like, if it was fun and it sounded badass, just hitting it. We didn't hide it. We weren't afraid to do it. We were like, this is really the record for us to like open up and just do what we want to do. Like, not be like, oh, we got to write another melodic song, or oh, we got to do, no, like, let's just like, this record is meant to kick you in the teeth when you listen to it. So, I think this is like the record where like both kind of like combined in like perfectly, at least in our eyes.
Some singers were invited to this recording. When did you decide these songs needed guest voices, and why these artists?
Well, we like doing features and stuff because we like including our friends and like people that we look up to in our songs. So that was always a plan. But this record we didn't go as heavy as we did on the last one. I'd say this one was the I don't know how we'll outdo this one personally, but we met Gerard Way like a few years ago, and have become friends, and he's a really, really nice guy, and he's very busy guy and very talented, and we were finishing up the record, and I texted him and I was just like, hey man, you wanna sing on a new Frozen Soul song? And he was just like, yeah. It was that easy. I mean, there's really nothing else to it. He didn't even want us to pay him for it. He was just like, yeah, he just wanted to be a part of a song that he liked, and and wanted to do something fun. And it was really the same with Rob and Devin. Like, I'd say the biggest difference though between the three is I wrote the lyrics for the part that Gerard sang and then the part that Devin sang. But in Invoke War, Rob actually wrote all of his lyrics. He really like took ownership in his part in the song, and me and him had a talk, and we talked for over an hour about our families and just our experiences with loss, and yeah, he just like owned it. Like he was super into the idea, and once he found out that the song was like a follow up song to Arsenal of War, he was like really awesome. And he originally just had the same part from the beginning of the song that says I invoke war and stuff, and then the breakdown hits, but he took all that out for the second time and put his lyrics in and gave it his whole heart, and it's really awesome. And he's also in the music video too, so it's really cool. And Devin, we were actually going to do a music video for that song, but couldn't make it work timeline wise, so we ended up not doing one yet. But hopefully we still can at some point. But we've been friends. Me and Devin have been friends forever. Our bands kind of came up at the same time, and I've been touring and we've toured together, and our names get mentioned a lot, in the same areas and stuff, and it's just like it was only a matter of time. So I'm really stoked Devin was so down to do it.
In this case, when you write the lyrics for them, did you need to explain the emotion of the songs, or they catch it and it was easy to do the recording?
For the most part, it was easy. The only one that I like fully had to explain things to in depth was Rob, and that's just because he wanted to know what the song was about, because the lyrics are pretty brutal. So he wanted to kind of make sure that the song was about like the right thing, and I dressed it up as being a death metal song and being really brutal, but it's invoking war on a part of yourself. It's trying to handle yourself in the right way, and getting rid of self-doubt and all that stuff. So he was pretty awesome about that once he found that out. And Gerard, I just had to talk about what the song was, and he was totally down too. Dreadnought is more or less about something as special as like my brother's passing and stuff like that. It's more of like just a super fun song, and that's one of the reasons we wanted Devin on that song, because it's like it's fun, and that's like what Sanguisugabogg is just it's a band about having fun. And so that was like Devin just was like, all right, which part am I doing? And I told him, and he was nailed it and was cool about it, and didn't really have to talk about a meaning, because it's about a robot killing people.
Is true that you were a former drummer?
Mm-hmm.
You were, or do you consider still a drummer?
I mean, I'm still a drummer. I'll always be a drummer.
You always be a drummer, yes.
Yeah.
So this question is a little difficult, but I think that you know how to answer. What makes a great death metal vocalist rhythmically, as a former drummer?
I mean, I don't know if I have like the right answer for that. I mean, for me personally, I don't consider myself like a death metal vocalist. Like, I'm a drummer. So most of the time I'm relying on the drums for my beat and my rhythm. I think, it's like heavy music in general. I think like the best heavy music to me is very rhythm focused. I feel like it's almost like, if not to me, the most important part is the rhythm section. And I feel like I could just go crazy constantly, or just follow the drums. And I'm not very talented when it comes to vocals. I don't know any kind of techniques or any of that stuff. I just like, try to sound like the guys that I, am inspired by, and I think for me, it's just, the drums. Like I'm playing drums with my mouth basically is like what I'm doing. So I don't know if that really answers the question, but I think, I think for any heavy band, it's focusing on the drums, is probably like your best bet. Most important part.
It's the most important part, yes. So, is or are there any drummer that you follow?
I'm sad to say not really. um, I don't get a lot of chances to play drums anymore. So for me, it's like I've never quite been the type of guy that just like follows specific like artists, if that makes sense. I know it may sound bad, but it's like when I grew up like playing drums and stuff, like there wasn't a specific drummer I was like, oh man, I want to sound like that drummer. It was like I just wanted to play drums. So a lot of it was like I never really took the time to learn cover songs and stuff like that, like really long actual full cover songs and stuff like that, because like I don't know, I had this thing where I felt like if I just covered songs, then that was all I was ever gonna do, in a sense. And then in bands, there was a couple of cover songs, little short intros and stuff we played, but never really like became a cover guy. And I don't know, maybe I'd be a better drummer if I would have, but there's not really like, any drummers other than like I'd say like Lars, Dave Lombardo, like those two drummers I think are my favorite, but Lars is ultimately my favorite drummer, I guess, and it's because like he arranged some amazing songs, and one of my favorite things to do as a musician is arranging songs. So I can hear like I love hearing riffs and figuring out where they go and where the parts come together and stuff. So like for me, like Lars was just always the best to do that. And he also like kind of taught me that you didn't have to be the most insanely technical drummer on a recording or live to like hit that fucking beat, And I think that's very important because they're like, the most successful band on the face of this earth basically. And, Lars is hitting the most basic stuff, and that's all you got to do sometimes if you hit the right beat, and create the feel. And so he kind of taught me, that like, you feel it in here, more than anything, more than your technical ability. If you're not feeling the rhythm in here, then you're going to miss, And so I kind of live my whole musical life by that kind of rule. And I do it with my voice and everything. It's like, if I feel like it's not hitting the beat, if I feel like I'm not on rhythm, I feel like if I speed up too much and don't slow down at the right time or whatever, then it's not right. And I can hear it when we're writing and when we're playing. I'm like, oh, hold on, slow that down just a little bit. I can hear it all, and it's like all from listening to like Metallica and whatnot. So yeah, I guess the answer is Lars. I don't know.
So, my last question, Chad. In the future, how would you like this album to be remembered in death metal history?
I guess I wouldn't mind it being remembered as like a record that shows that like you can play death metal and have fun. You don't have to take yourself too seriously. You can still like punk and hardcore and deathcore and metalcore or whatever, You could still like all that and listen to death metal too. It doesn't have to be like so separated. It would be nice, if this record was remembered as a record that kind of helped bridge those gaps, because in reality, like we wrote this record for anybody who likes heavy music to be able to enjoy it, and we tried to not like, I guess, stick ourselves in a dark room, and only invite a couple people in. We tried to really make the record that was just an enjoyer of heavy music can really like it, so It would be cool if it was remembered as a record that did that, you know?
Chad Green, thank you very much for your time. So
Yeah, man.
we recommend again this recording that is a Frozen Soul. The name of the new recording, No Place of War. Chad, thank you very much. I hope
Yeah,
to
man.
see you one day on the stage.
Heck yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
So, bye.
Bye.